Welcome to the Rabbi's Message. This is Rabbi Elazar Bogomilsky bringing you the weekly Torah portion. This coming week is a Torah portion of the last of the 5 books known as Deuteronomy, Devarim. What's interesting in this week's Torah portion, primarily this entire book, discusses the last 37 days of Moses' life. He stands before the Jewish people, and once again, he repeats and reiterates all the different laws and encounters and the stories of challenging moments. In the last 37 days of his life, he still turns to God and he says, I would love for you to grant me access, that I should be able to enter the Holy Land of Israel. And he prays, and he requests, and he beseeches God to please allow him and grant him access to the Holy Land of Israel. But what's interesting is, we stumble across a verse in this week's Torah portion that it says, Moses turns to God, and Moses says, Eicha eseh levadi, how am I supposed to do this alone? Ironically, we stand before a very somber moment in Jewish history. Presently, we're in the 3 weeks, which are known as the 3 weeks that lead up to the day of Tisha B'Av. This date is the day when the temple, both temples, were destroyed in Jerusalem. Tisha B'Av is the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av. Today, the way we utilize those 24-hour period is with prayer, fasting. We refrain from doing anything enjoyable. We mourn the destruction of the temple. And our commentary explains that the 3-week period that we're presently in, which was in the moment when they surrounded and broke through the walls of Jerusalem, until they actually burnt the temple, which again was exactly 3 weeks later. In general, in Jewish history, this is not considered the enjoyable time of the year, even though it falls out during the summer, when we're celebrating, we're enjoying each other's company, we're taking traveling trips, vacations. But a person should always be aware of these historical moments in Jewish history, and especially for the day of Tisha B'Av, the day of fasting. A person should read and lament the destruction of the temple, the first temple and the second temple. But this expression in this week's Torah portion, when it says, when Moses stands before God and says, Eicha eseh levadi, how am I supposed to do this all alone? This expression of Eicha, the how, at last, how am I supposed to do this, was not the only time in Jewish history that a leader, a prophet, asked this question. We find 700 years later, the prophet Isaiah says the same expression, Eicha, how is it possible that the faithful city of Jerusalem became an area of prostitution? These are the words that Isaiah cries. And he says she was full of justice, righteousness, but now it's full of murderers. And interestingly, we take this journey 200 years after that, and we come across the prophet Jeremiah. And we find in the book of Jeremiah that Jeremiah's heart is wrenching when he discusses the destruction of the temple. In the book of Lamentation, he writes, Eicha, how is it possible? At last, she sits in solitude. The city that was great with people has become like a widow. Eicha Yashva Vadad, Ha'ir Rabasiyam. The book we actually read in synagogues throughout the world in a very somber tone. And we sit on the floor when we read from the book of Eicha. It's when we begin the fast on Tisha B'Av. The question that we need to understand is there a unique correlation? Why do we find three giants in Jewish history? Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah. Why do we find that they use the term Eicha? At last, seemingly on the surface, there is no connection. Each one's talking about a different perspective. Moses is talking about himself. How can I do this all alone? Isaiah is talking about the city of Jerusalem, the immorality in Jerusalem. And Jeremiah is discussing and lamenting the destruction of the temple. Is there a connection? The answer is, this is the most profound and meaningful message that one should walk away with listening to these words from Moses, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. Let's discuss Moses for a moment. Moses is complaining, and he turns to God. Moses has that ability to speak face to face. He wasn't complaining about that he doesn't have vacation days, the stressful schedule, the lack of time of leisure. He wasn't complaining about the responsibility that he was given to be the leader. What he was complaining about was the fate of the Jewish people. How? He says to himself, and he turns to God, how can I carry your desire, what you want me to do in this world? How can I do it all by myself? If only one person is ready to put himself on the line in the fight for a better world, if only one other individual would step forward and say, I am willing, Moses, to be a partner. The triumph of evil doesn't occur as a result of the perpetrators of evil per se. It happens only because of the many ordinary men and women who don't care enough to stand up for what is right. When ordinary people that have good moral stand up and have the courage to face and protest injustice, automatically any type of immoral acts are dead. They can't exist. When the world sees that there is energy, there is positive interaction, there's excitement, there isn't the loneliness, there isn't a long rider, a person that says, I'm going to do this all alone. You can't build a world yourself. There's an expression that says, Ein melech belo am. There is no king without a nation. If a person proclaimed and they stood on the I-5 and they said, I am the king of the universe, what will happen to them? They will end up in Bellevue, not Bellevue, the city, but Bellevue Health Center. That's not the approach of life. You can't be a leader if you don't have followers. You can't be someone that proclaims this is right and we're going to change it if nobody's listening. Moses cries to God and says, the challenge that I have is that Eicha aseh levadi. How can I do this alone? How can I do this all by myself? How do I do it? I physically can't do it alone. But the question that we ask, wait a second, what's the correlation and the connection between Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah? They lived 900 years later than Moses. What's the connection? The answer is when there's a loneliness, when there is the concept of segregation, when there isn't the energy that can proclaim and steer evil off the road and say there's no room for evil to exist. immorality grows. Surfaces that are constantly being used and washed and interacted with. Mold and other funguses don't grow on it. They grow in areas that are not being inhabited, not being used. Things that are constantly in use and engaged. When people are engaged in positive action, evil has no voice. Perhaps the link and the connection between all these echas, this word that seemingly seems not to fit into the Torah portion, how, at last, is telling us a profound lesson and teaching us an important message for life. That when Moses says, and he cries out, "How can I carry you alone? How can I do this all by myself?" This perhaps is the link to Isaiah's issue. When he cries and he says, "How has the faithful city become a prostitute?" Isaiah asks. She was full of justice, righteous. Now it became a city full of murderers. How indeed? Perhaps the answer is because Moses was left alone. Moses was left alone on the battlefield for goodness and morality. If there is a group of positive energy, there's no room for negative action. To transform a city from darkness into light, from changing a city of immorality. And you see this in parts of this country. I come from New Jersey. Remember, 18 years ago, the Fulton Fish Market was an area that was known as the mobsters' hangout. It was a place that you didn't want to end up there by day or by night. Giuliani was the mayor at that time, and he said, "This is not going to happen. I am going to clean up that area. I'm going to transform the type of lifestyle, the things, the laws that people think are archaic to do there. I'm going to show them the real law." And in a very short period of time, the entire famous Fulton Street Market, Fulton Fish Market, all the mobster movies always portray the famous Fulton Street Fish Market, was cleaned up. In other areas as well. It's simply, if there's a person that can lead and others follow, that's the key. Evil, disturbance, murder, racketeering, and other disturbing interactions between human beings can't exist. It's that simple. Goodness, kindness prevails, overpowers, and has the ability to transform any negative act to become positive. And this is the next stage. When Jeremiah says he laments the destruction of the temple, it all founded, it's all embedded on Moses' cry. When Moses says in this week's Torah portion, "How can I do this alone?" Moses envisioned, and he saw the challenging outcome, that when you stand alone, it leads to a city that can be destroyed, and it leads to a temple that can be burnt. It leads to acts of immorality. The message is clear. Within our own life, everyone has those moments, those things that you wonder, how can I overcome them? What Moses is telling all mankind, don't do it alone. Eicha eselav adi. The reality is you can't do this alone. The more people you engage around you in positive acts, those challenging individuals, those challenging moments within an individual's life, all of a sudden will be transformed with positive energy, with conquering ability, taking evil, taking moments of life when a person says, "How? Why? Impossible. I'm scared." Surrounding yourself by the joy, the happiness, the ability to literally make something that's negative into positive. When we do this together, when we come together as a community, on a more personal level, when you come together with your family, people have disputes within families over foolish things that for years there's no talking, there's no interaction. For years, their children already don't speak because their parents were in arguments, were in fights. And then when you find out what it was, after research and research, you say, what? Over that, all these years, decade after decade, a dispute, a rift within the family. Change it. Realize what Moses is teaching us. Realize the power and the importance of community, of communication, of acceptance, of understanding what it means to be surrounded by goodness. The more one is surrounded by good, even if it's not in your comfort zone to be good, you will be good. Our rabbis tell us a person should awake in the morning and say a prayer. And in the prayer you say, distant me, may Adam Ra, from an evil person, may Chaver Ra, a negative influence of a friend, Mishachein Ra, from an evil or a negative energy from a neighbor. You might say, come on, I need to say a prayer to that. The reality is, yes, when a person is conscious and aware of these ideas, that they exist, and it's up to us to funnel, to focus, to inspire, to make that circle around us, that's a circle of joy, of goodness, then Moses won't be saying, Eicha, how can I sit alone? How can I do this all by myself? And the outcome will be the rebuilding of the temple. Instead of the 9th of Av being the time when we lament, we cry, we talk about, and we relive the destruction of both temples. It will be a time, as we say, V'sechazena einenu b'shufcha l'tzion berachamim. Once again, we will raise our eyes and see the city of Zion, see the rebuilding of the temple. We can rejoice once again with Moses, with Jeremiah, with Isaiah, with all the great leaders and inspirers who've taught us so many valuable laws, who taught us how to be a person that doesn't just think of self, but understands the unique contribution to life. Let us hope and pray that this coming Friday begins that week, Saturday actually. We usher in the 9-day period before the 9th of Av. Let us hope and pray that this coming Tisha B'Av, we should all be in Jerusalem with the rebuilding of the temple speedily in our days. You're listening to the Rabbi's message. Wishing you all a blessed, enjoyable, and meaningful week.